This is the Convene Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk, where we discuss interesting stories that appear in our popular newsletter, News Junkie. My name is Magdalena Tanasova, Digital Media Editor at Convene. Jen, tell us more about today's story.
Hi, this is Jen Dienst, Senior Editor. So I picked an article from earlier this week and that we ran in News Junkie. It was from Business Traveler, and it was titled U.S. Travel Industry Struggles to Recover, ranked 17th globally in new report. So I chose this article primarily because it cited some new research from the U.S. Travel Association. They did a study and it found that the United States ranks 17th out of 18 top travel markets in terms of global competitiveness. And this is according to Euromonitor International, who they partnered with for the study. And according to the U.S. Travel Association, this is due to decades of underinvestment and a lack of focus and coordination from federal policymakers, which is causing the U.S. to fall behind. So this is kind of disappointing. And we're seeing, some other research come out. We're seeing that travel is coming back. It's not quite back to 2019, but it's definitely steadily heading there when you look at just overall global travel and business travel. So that it kind of seems like a missed opportunity when you're kind of looking at it broadly. Something I thought that was interesting is, although the U.S. is a highly desired destination, we ranked pretty low in the safety category, according to the World Economic Forum Safety and Security Pillar, which considers various factors such as the prevalence of violence and crime. We also didn't do too well when it comes to technology. For example, we ranked in the middle of the pack on biometric security screening capabilities, with only 36% of U.S. international airport employing both biometric entry and exit systems. Apparently, this technology is severely underutilized, this is according to the report, compared to other nations, despite the fact that a majority of Americans are comfortable with biometric screening if it results in more efficient air travel. So something else that a lot of international travelers coming to the U.S. can probably speak to is lengthy customs wait times upon arrival in the U.S. Another big issue is the excessive visitor visa wait times, which is something that we actually touched on in a recent article in our December issue. Our editor, Casey Gale, wrote about. Casey, do you want to share some of the things that you learned when you wrote that story?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen. This is Casey Gale, managing editor. And this really was a highlight for me in this report, that it's one of the main causes of the U.S.'s struggle to recover our tourism. This has been an ongoing issue pretty much since the beginning of the pandemic, because even though we shut down travel for a time, we continued to accept applications for visas, which created this huge backlog that we really haven't recovered from. It's affected a few countries worse than others. Mexico, Brazil, and India are some of the hardest hit in terms of visa wait times. And I know the U.S. Travel Association estimates that this has cost the U.S. nearly 7 million in potential visitors and 12 billion in projected spending in 2023. The government is trying to work on this a bit because they realize it's just a mounting issue. 2 senators presented a bipartisan bill over the summer in 2023, the Visa Processing Improvement Act, which aimed to help processing times for nationals not included in the visa waiver program. So this was stuff like consular office flexibility and capacity, improving transparency and accountability, and revising the in-person interview waiver eligibility. So maybe some of these people can be fast-tracked instead of having to wait for their interview.
Maggie, I wanted to hear what your experience is, speaking to experience of coming from another country and going through customs in the United States. And Kurt, actually, as an American who's now living abroad, I'm sure you had a similar experience going to San Diego for convening leaders. So I'd love to hear from each of you.
Well, for the visa, I actually have to reapply because my 10-year visa is now going to expire later this year. Reading Casey's article, I was like, okay, I should apply early on rather than waiting for later in the year. Usually last time when I applied, my visa was processed very fast and I did not have an issue, even though I had never had a visa before. And I had to do an interview. Now I should be eligible to be fast-tracked without the interview, but we'll see if that will happen. So I can report at a later stage if the process has improved here in Bulgaria or not. But usually I have the experience of long wait times at airports coming into the US. Usually there is a huge line that lasts 2 to 3 hours easily. Very, very seldomly I had the luck to go through quickly. It has happened twice, and I've been many times to the US, so I consider it pure luck. Like this year when I went to San Diego for Convening Leaders, there really was nobody there. So I was extremely surprised as I planned for a long wait line, but pure luck. And I also was not grilled by the officer who had to check my documents, which was a first coming into the US. Usually it's a very long process of grilling and questions and many other questions. And after a long flight, it's not very fun. And the other thing that actually caught my eye in the report was the security. And I definitely can attest to that as a foreigner. For me now, the US is really not a safe destination. And in these reports, UK and France ranked very highly in terms of international travel. And I was thinking if that's also the case because they're in Europe. Europe is made out of so many countries and all these movements that are considered international travel. While for the US, the national market is so big. I always have this thing in mind when considering international visitors, the location of the country, in terms of geographical location. Within the EU, it's so easy to travel. And Kurt, maybe it's also easy for you now that you're living in Germany to just move around. You don't have the hassle of visas and borders and all that. So also a note to that for our listeners who might be interested to look into the results.
Yeah, I didn't have any issues going from Berlin to Paris over New Year's. It was a breeze. You don't even have to show anything or stop anywhere. But I didn't really have that big a thing. I flew in to Phoenix. It was pretty fast because it's not a big airport. We were the last plane to land because we were super late. So that was easy getting through there and getting my luggage and going to the hotel since I couldn't take my other flight. But I was just shocked by the 400-day wait time. That's crazy because, I don't plan a vacation more than maybe 3 months ahead of time. If I had that situation, I wouldn't be able to do it. But also people planning to go to an international conference in the US, they would have to schedule that like before the current year's conference took place, wherever that is.
When I wrote the visa wait time story, I spoke to an event organizer who talked about having issues getting people from like India, Pakistan, and parts of Africa to receive interview dates that even fell before the conference did. They would apply 6 or 8 months before the conference, and they wouldn't get interview dates until 10 or 12 months out. So it's a huge problem for the international planning community.
It's such a missed opportunity when you look at this global competitive analysis report that was also from the U.S. Travel Association. The United States is the #1 most desired destination on the list, ranking even before Spain and France, which are my favorite countries to visit. So people want to come here. It's not that people, don't want to come here. People do want to come here, whether it's for business or for pleasure. So it's kind of mind-boggling that we're making it so difficult for people, from countries like India. And I believe, Casey, I remember reading about this topic before. I believe there's issues for people coming from different countries in South America too, right?
Yes, Brazil is a big one, but a lot of Latin American countries have long wait times.
And Brazil is such there's a ton of outbound visitor traffic from Brazil to places like Florida. When I used to work for Visit Orlando, I remember us talking about that and, what can we do to kind of target that audience, because so many people were coming from Brazil and other countries in South America. So when people from those countries come, they stay for longer periods of time and they spend money. They come, they might be coming for a business conference, but they're bringing their family and they're adding on vacations, going to places like Disney World. So they're coming and they're spending a lot of money. I actually remember, hearing about entire buses of tourists that would be dropped off at stores in the Orlando area, and they would bring suitcases and go shopping and fill their suitcases and bring those back to their countries. So, they're coming here and those are high value visitors. So it's just lost on me why we're not making it easier for them.
I had two thoughts. One was just what can meeting planners do about this? Because it's a huge problem. And if you attract international attendees, then what are your options? So obviously you can grow that audience. People who can't come to the US can join an event virtually. So I think looking at the responses to the 20 in their 20s questions we asked, PCMA's 20 in their 20s, they all said that virtual is the future of events and somehow an online component of an event is the future, which was really interesting because from our meetings market survey, 42% that said that they are just doing face-to-face events. They're not doing any online component. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. And the other question we asked the 20 in their 20s class of 2024 was, if you could do one thing with the snap of your finger, how would you change the industry? If I could just snap my finger, here's what I would do about this problem. I would say, let's invest in bringing visitors to the United States and take that money that we're losing and help the migrants, because we have a huge migrant problem in the United States. And New York City is just like almost devastated by the burden of that. So if I could just solve that problem with a snap of my fingers, I would say, invest in this and funnel the money over here.
This is Barbara Palmer. I'm deputy editor. I was trying to do a little research on the progress of the bill that was introduced. It appears to be entangled with immigration. I think everyone's aware of the incredible immigration pressures and problems in the United States. And I think that is really complicating this. To separate that out and kind of fast track that, as you say, doesn't seem to be happening. And I was going to say that really does speak to the lack of visibility of the business events industry. I think at Convening Leaders, I heard a statistic that if the industry was a country, it would be the 13th largest economy. And I don't think anyone really knows that. You just don't hear business events come up when they're talking about visas. It's usually, tourists. I just think there's a tremendous need for people to understand the economic stakes. The other thing that I think is happening is that, the pandemic has reshuffled so much. And one thing that I think is really kind of changing these statistics is how many Chinese tourists and business visitors are no longer coming to the United States because of the strained relationships between the two countries. There used to be 350 daily flights between US and China, and now there's 50. So that was a huge part. The last thing I'll say is that, all of the problems that I think we've mentioned, why the U.S. has lost luster, I don't think that has happened in the research and development part of the United States. I think the United States is still seen as a very robust and valuable leader of scientific and technological discovery. And that really speaks to the need for both what Michelle said, online, to not let the physical barriers stop people from collaborating, and just the urgent need for us to use the business events industry to figure out how to solve some of these really long-standing problems of safety.
That was a great discussion. Thank you all for adding a little bit of nuances to this quite complex issue. And I do hope that Capitol Hill start improving on these things. And I hope my visa will be processed very quickly so that I can still go to PCMA events as I'm required to. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time.